The plant the FDA banned. Why this 100-ton per acre miracle fertilizer was erased from history. The secret to eternal soil fertility might be hiding in a toxic plant that the fertilizer industry doesn't want you to grow. In the 1960s, a series of agricultural trials in Great Britain documented something that many scientists at the time believed was biologically impossible. They recorded yields of 100 tons per acre, year after year, on soil so depleted and poor that every other traditional crop had completely failed. This wasn't the result of some new laboratory chemical or a high-tech GMO breakthrough. It was a single plant that could be cut 5 times in a single growing season, regrowing to its full size in just 4 short weeks. Even more incredible was the fact that it required absolutely no fertilizer input, no irrigation once established, and didn't need to be replanted for 20 years. Laboratory analysis eventually confirmed that its decomposition rates defied every known green manure in existence. While other crops take weeks to break down and release their nutrients, this plant literally melts into the soil in just 48 hours. Before we dive into the mystery of why this plant vanished from your local garden center, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments. Where in the world are you watching from, and what is the #1 crop you want to grow to become more self-sufficient? Today, I am going to show you exactly how this forgotten miracle plant can replace every bag of fertilizer in your shed forever, providing you with a senior-friendly, lazy way to maintain a thriving garden even if the global supply chains collapse. By the end of this video, you will understand the specific biology that makes this plant a living mining drill for nutrients and why a $230 billion industry might have been very happy to see it labeled as toxic. Stick around, because I'm also going to reveal the specific sterile variety you need to find so your garden doesn't turn into an accidental jungle. We live in a world where the cost of living is skyrocketing and our food system feels more fragile than ever. Most of us have become entirely dependent on a global fertilizer market that generates over $200 billion annually, consuming massive amounts of natural gas just to produce the nitrogen farmers need to feed us. For the senior gardener or the person with a bad back, hauling heavy bags of chemical fertilizer every spring isn't just expensive, it's physically exhausting. But it wasn't always this way. Throughout history, especially during the Victorian era in England, people cultivated specific insurance plants to protect themselves against starvation. They knew secrets about the soil that have been systematically erased by the Industrial Revolution's shift toward mechanization and chemical inputs. I want you to imagine a poor Quaker man in Essex named Henry Doubleday, who lived through the horrors of the Irish potato famine in the mid-1800s. He watched as 1 million people starved to death, and that trauma fueled a lifelong obsession with finding a plant that could prevent such a tragedy from ever happening again. In a moment, I will show you how a simple letter he wrote to the royal palace in Russia resulted in an accidental, hybrid plant that produced yields no one had ever seen before. This plant is the ultimate lazy crop because it does the hard work of mining the earth for you. It stores months of fertility in its leaves, and as you'll see shortly, it carries a secret deep underground that allows it to survive temperatures down to 30 degrees below zero without any help from you. The plant we are talking about is comfrey, scientifically known as Symphytum. Its history as a healing herb stretches back to 90 AD, when the Greek physician Dioscorides documented it as a treatment for broken bones, giving it the nickname knit bone. The name Symphytum literally translates to make grow together, a testament to its legendary adhesive and regenerative properties. In fact, the Romans were so impressed by its sticky, mucilaginous roots that Pliny the Elder recorded boiling them into a paste so strong it could stick pieces of meat back together. For 2,000 years, it was a staple in European gardens, valued for its ability to mend the human body. However, the real revolution happened when Henry Doubleday, the Quaker from Essex, stopped looking at comfrey as a medicine and started looking at it as a source of glue for postage stamps. In the 1850s, he wrote to the head gardener at the royal palace in St. Petersburg to request a specific Russian variety. But fate intervened in a way that would change agriculture forever. The plants he received weren't the pure species he expected. They were an accidental cross, an F1 hybrid that exhibited a level of genetic vigor that neither parent plant possessed. Doubleday quickly realized that these hybrid plants produced yields that dwarfed anything else on his farm, reaching that incredible 100 tons per acre. He abandoned his glue business and spent the next 30 years researching how this single plant could solve the world's hunger crisis. When Doubleday passed away at the age of 92, a tragedy occurred that nearly buried this wisdom forever. His family burned all 30 years of his meticulous notes, data, and cultivation techniques. It wasn't until 1948 that a young horticulturist named Lawrence Hills rediscovered the story and dedicated his life to finishing what the Quaker had started. Hills founded the Henry Doubleday Research Association and systematically tested 21 different varieties of comfrey side by side to find the ultimate strain. One variety stood out above all others, dominating every metric of growth and nutrient density. He named it Bocking 14. What makes Bocking 14 the holy grail for a survival gardener or a senior looking for a lazy fertilizer is its unique biology. Unlike wild comfrey, Bocking 14 is sterile, meaning it produces no seeds and won't take over your entire yard like an invasive weed. It stays exactly where you plant it. But the real magic happens underground. While most garden vegetables have roots that barely scratch the surface, comfrey roots act as living mining drills, penetrating up to 10 feet into the earth. Down there, they access deep water tables and pull up minerals like potassium, calcium, and phosphorus from the subsoil, nutrients that are completely out of reach for your tomatoes or peppers. It is quite literally a biological nutrient pump that brings the deep earth to the surface for free. To understand why this plant terrified the chemical industry, you have to look at the numbers. While standard farmyard manure rarely exceeds 1.5% potassium, the Bocking 14 variety of comfrey delivers over 7%. But the nutrient density is only half the story. The real revolution is the speed of delivery. Most green manures, like clover or alfalfa, contain high amounts of fiber, meaning they have to sit in a compost heap for weeks or even months before they break down and release their minerals. Comfrey is different. Because of its extremely low fiber content, soil microbes can devour the leaves in as little as 48 hours. If you toss fresh comfrey leaves onto a compost pile that has gone cold and stalled, the temperature will spike within hours as the microbes go into a feeding frenzy. This material transforms into black, nutrient-rich humus while other crops are still sitting there intact. This is why gardeners call it compost activator. For a senior gardener, this is a game changer. You don't have to turn heavy compost piles for months on end. You simply chop and drop, cutting the leaves and laying them directly on the soil surface around your heavy feeders like tomatoes and potatoes. The plant does the composting for you, right where the nutrients are needed most. Now, you might be wondering, if this plant is so effective that it can produce 100 tons of organic fertilizer per acre, why isn't it in every garden center in the country? The answer lies in the massive $230 billion global fertilizer industry. This industry is built on a model of annual dependency. They need you to buy bags of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium every single year. Comfrey breaks that model entirely. You plant it once, and it continues to produce for 20 years without you ever having to open your wallet again. It requires no irrigation after it's established because those 10-foot roots can find water even during a drought. And it requires no pesticides because almost nothing bothers it. In 1954, the world was at a crossroads. The Haber-Bosch process had allowed us to synthesize ammonia from the air, saving millions from starvation but addicting our food system to fossil fuels and natural gas. If every farmer and gardener had followed Lawrence Hills and planted Bocking 14, the commercial fertilizer industry would have lost its foothold. The industry knew that fertility could be grown rather than bought, and that posed a direct threat to their bottom line. This set the stage for the events of 2001, when a specific regulatory warning was used to effectively erase comfrey from the public consciousness. On July 6, 2001, the FDA issued a warning that fundamentally changed the way people viewed this plant. The agency advised manufacturers to remove comfrey dietary supplements from the market because the roots contain pyrrolizidine alkaloids, compounds that can cause liver damage if ingested in large quantities over a long period. The FDA's decision was based on sound science regarding internal consumption like pills and teas. However, the media headlines that followed rarely made the distinction between eating the plant and using it as a garden tool. Within 5 years, the word toxic became synonymous with comfrey, and garden centers across America stopped stocking it entirely. What the headlines failed to mention was that soil microbes break down these alkaloids rapidly. Using comfrey as a fertilizer or mulch poses zero risk to humans, as the alkaloids do not migrate into the edible parts of your vegetables in any significant way. This regulatory confusion was perfectly timed for the fertilizer industry. In 2001, natural gas prices were rising, and huge conglomerates were consolidating their power. Just as the world needed a way to gain independence from expensive chemical inputs, the one plant that offered permanent self-sufficiency was declared too dangerous to even sell in a nursery. It was a surgical erasure of a 2,000-year-old agricultural partner. Despite being erased from the shelves of mainstream big-box stores, the biological math of comfrey hasn't changed. Bocking 14 still produces those legendary 100 tons per acre. It still survives temperatures down to minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and it still thrives on marginal, poor land where nothing else will grow. For the modern gardener, it remains the ultimate freedom crop. Because it grows from a single root fragment, it cannot be effectively patented or controlled by a corporation. Once you have one plant, you have an infinite supply of fertility for yourself and your neighbors. If you want to start your own fertility factory, the process is incredibly senior-friendly. You don't need to dig deep holes or prepare complex garden beds. You simply take a root cutting, place it in the soil, and keep it watered until it establishes its deep taproot. After that, the plant is essentially unkillable. You can cut the leaves when the plant reaches about 2 feet tall, and it will regrow to its full size within a month. In a single season, you can get 5 separate harvests of high potassium mulch. It's the ultimate lazy solution. The plant does the mining, the microbes do the composting, and you get the heavy-yielding tomatoes. The power of comfrey lies in its ability to decentralize the food supply. Lawrence Hills understood that for this plant to truly help humanity, it had to be impossible to monopolize. That is why he refused to patent Bocking 14 and instead mailed root cuttings for free to anyone who asked, from gardeners in England to farmers in Africa. He knew that once this plant was in the hands of the people, no corporation could take it back because it grows so easily from just a single root fragment. Today, while the official ban on internal supplements remains, the plant itself has moved underground, literally and metaphorically. It has passed between permaculture enthusiasts and self-sufficiency experts like contraband, preserving a legacy of independence that spans centuries. For the lazy gardener, this contraband is the ultimate labor saver. If you have a patch of comfrey, you have a permanent source of liquid fertilizer that can outperform many commercial feeds. You can simply stuff the leaves into a bucket with a bit of water, let them melt into a dark, smelly concentrate, and dilute it to feed your garden. It solves the problem of soil fertility without you ever having to leave your property or spend a dime. This is exactly what the $230 billion industry spent 150 years trying to make you forget. That fertility is something you can grow, not something you must buy. If you forget everything else, remember this. The most powerful tools for our survival are often the ones nature provides for free. Comfrey is not a weed. It is freedom from a fragile supply chain. It is a living pump that reaches deep into the earth to bring life to your garden for 20 years at a time. The ban in 2001 may have removed it from the glossy shelves of big-box retailers, but it couldn't change the biological truth that this plant produces 100 tons of fertility per acre for almost no work. If you want a garden that feeds your grandchildren, start by planting a crop that takes care of itself. Your first step today is simple. Look for a reputable source of Bocking 14 Russian comfrey root cuttings. Make sure it is the sterile Bocking 14 variety so it won't seed and spread where you don't want it. Once you plant it, you'll have a permanent partner in your journey toward food security. Tell me in the comments, which one of these survival crops are you going to plant first, and what country are you watching from? If you found this helpful, tap like and subscribe so more people can rediscover this lost wisdom. Next, I'm planning a deep dive into the 10 medicinal weeds hiding in your lawn. Comment the word medicinal if you want to see that one next. Would you like me to find a list of reputable nurseries that specialize in Bocking 14 root cuttings for your region?